On his way home, he saw a man carrying his little son on his shoulders. He paused and gazed at them with deep longing, a faint and sorrowful smile resting on his face. When Ikena returned home, Cynthia asked why his uncle had sent for him. He brushed it aside, saying there was nothing to worry about, then pulled her into a warm embrace and gave her a gentle smile. That night, however, he tossed and turned on his mat, unable to find rest, for his mind was troubled by the words of his mother and uncles. By morning, he had lost his appetite. Cynthia noticed at once and asked, "What is wrong?" Once again he replied that it was nothing. Yet, deep within her heart, Cynthia knew that something was weighing heavily on her husband's mind. As the days passed, the words of his mother and uncles weighed heavily on Ikena's mind. One afternoon, while they were working on the farm, he turned to Cynthia and told her that he had decided to listen to his mother and take another wife. At those words, Cynthia stood frozen where she was. Her hands trembled as she dropped her hoe. Without saying any other word, she ran back home. Once inside, she locked herself in the room and wept bitterly. It felt as though Ikena had driven a knife straight through her heart with what he had said. In the days that followed his decision, Ikena and Cynthia were no longer at peace with each other. Their home, once filled with warmth and laughter, grew cold and silent. The love that used to bind them felt strained by unspoken pain. Yet, despite the tension and sorrow that hung between them, Ikena's mind had already been made up, and his heart was set on the path he had chosen. Ikena then went to his mother's compound and told her that he had accepted their proposal. His face revealed deep conflict, for his heart was not at peace with the decision he had made. But his mother burst into joyful dancing, declaring that very soon her son would give her a grandson. The days went by quickly. Ikena and Cynthia's relationship was scarred. It no longer felt the way it used to be. When Ikena tried to speak to her, she ignores him because her heart was in pain, for she had never thought that Ikena would do this, knowing how much he would hurt her. Cynthia became cold and distant to Ikena. She rarely speaks to him. She stopped going to the farm and locks herself in the room, her mind filled with worries, her heart in pain. Ikena saw all this, and his heart was filled with guilt, but he wanted to have a child of his own. The day of the wedding finally arrived. Ikena married another woman, Mara, in a simple ceremony held within Mara's compound, attended by close family and friends. Cynthia, unable to bear the heartache of her husband taking another wife, packed her belongings and hurried to her parents' house. As she entered the compound, she spotted her mother seated under the shade of a tree. Overwhelmed with grief, Cynthia ran into her mother's arms, her voice trembling as she cried, "Mama, Mama," before breaking down into bitter sobs. Her mother's heart ached at the sight of her daughter in such pain. She wrapped her in a warm embrace, holding her close, and whispered words of comfort, assuring her that everything would eventually be all right. After the wedding, Ikena brought Mara home. To his surprise, Cynthia was nowhere to be found, and he noticed that her bag was missing. Instantly, he realized she must have gone to her parents' house. He wanted to rush after her immediately, but Imara stopped him gently. "My husband," she said softly, "let me prepare dinner for you. It's already late. You can go and bring her back tomorrow." Those words were not from her heart. Ikena listened to Imara and decided to go bring her back the next day. The following morning, Cynthia woke up feeling nauseous and began vomiting. She told her mother, who immediately decided to accompany her to the village health center. Without delay, Cynthia and her mother set off. Ikena arrived at Cynthia's parents' house. He knocked repeatedly on the door, but no one answered. Concerned, he decided to wait under the tree outside, hoping to see anyone who might come out. At the village health center, the nurse delivered news that left Cynthia in shock. She was 2 weeks pregnant. At first, Cynthia could hardly believe it, but when the nurse repeated the confirmation, her mother smiled beside her. Cynthia had never imagined she would hear such joyful news. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her mother whispered, "God hears our prayers." On their way back home, they spotted Ikena still sitting under the tree. His eyes glistened with tears. "Cynthia, I have come to bring you home," he said softly. Angrily, Cynthia replied, "No, I do not want to go back. Your new wife is there. You should leave." And with that, she hurried inside. Ikena remained standing, his eyes filled with guilt and sorrow. Cynthia's mother approached him gently and invited him to sit with her outside the house. "Ikena," she began, her voice heavy with concern, "my daughter is hurt beyond measure. You have wounded her deeply, and she is struggling to bear the pain. You should go home for now. With time, she will adjust and forgive you. But at this moment, she is deeply hurt." She paused, then added, "I understand your desire for a child. Who wouldn't want to have their own child? But you pursued that at the expense of your family's happiness." Tears rolled down Ikena's cheeks. "Mama, I'm sorry. I love Cynthia with all my heart, and I have hurt her," he admitted. Cynthia's mother looked at him, almost on the verge of revealing the news of Cynthia's pregnancy, but she restrained herself. With a heavy heart, Ikena stood up and left, leaving behind the weight of regret and longing. At home, Ikena felt Cynthia's presence in every corner of the house, and his heart filled with regrets. Emara had been diligently washing clothes, cleaning dishes, and sweeping the compound. But suddenly, her demeanor began to change. She became cold and disrespectful. When Ikena asked her a question, she snapped at him. She stopped preparing meals and abandoned her household chores altogether. "Let's go to the farm," Ikena suggested one morning. "Which farm?" she replied sharply. "I cannot go. I want to visit my friend, and I won't be back until late at night." Ikena looked at her in silence. He didn't utter a word and simply left for the farm. The next day, when Ikena's mother and sisters came visiting, Emara blocked the doorway, refusing to let them in. "Mama, who told you to come without my permission? Did I give you permission to enter my house?" she demanded. Ikena's mother was taken aback by Emara's rude behavior. She had never expected such disrespect. Then, Emara turned to Ikena's sisters and scolded them. "Why are you always running around with your mother? At your age, shouldn't you be at your husband's house?" She firmly told them to leave, refusing to let them enter the house. Ikena's mother stood frozen in shock, unable to speak. Eventually, she quietly turned and left, completely astonished by Emara's audacity. Ikena's mother didn't know how to tell Ikena what his wife did. She just kept what Emara did to herself. One day, Emara prepared a meal and deliberately poured in an excessive amount of pepper before serving it to Ikena. The moment he took a bite, his face flushed red from the heat. Hidden behind the kitchen door, Emara burst into uncontrollable laughter. That night, while they were asleep, she suddenly slapped Ikena and claimed she was killing a mosquito. "Which mosquito?" Ikena asked in shock, holding his cheeks in pain. Emara's behavior soon became too much for Ikena to endure. She constantly hurled insults at him over the smallest matters. No matter what he said, she responded with harsh and cutting words. At last, Ikena could bear it no longer and told her to leave his house. But she replied stubbornly that she was going nowhere. She declared that she had come to bear him a son and would not leave until she fulfilled that purpose. Ikena went to his mother's house and knelt before her in humility. With a heavy heart, He told her that he wanted to return Imara's bride price because he was not happy, that his happiness lies with Cynthia. And he also confessed that he wished to go and beg Cynthia to return home. His mother looked at him and was instantly filled with guilt, knowing that she was the one who had brought Imara into his life. Her heart sank as she realized the pain her decision had caused. Ikena pleaded with her, asking that she accompany him to his in-laws' house so they could bring Cynthia back home. Meanwhile, Cynthia's belly grew larger with each passing day. Though she was filled with joy at the life growing inside her, sadness also lingered in her heart. This was the life she had once dreamed of sharing with her husband. In her thoughts, she imagined Ikena singing to their unborn child and dancing with delight at the coming baby. Yet, instead of joy shared with her husband, she carried both hope and sorrow alone. Cynthia and her mother were seated outside the house, and her mother was gently feeding her slices of fresh mango. Just then, Ikena and his mother walked into the compound. They greeted Cynthia and her mother, and though Cynthia answered their greeting, her face looked pale and distant. Suddenly, Ikena dropped to his knees before her. In a soft and trembling voice, he said, "My love, I am truly sorry for what I have done. In my desire to have a child, I hurt you and tore our family apart. Please forgive me."
Cynthia looked at her husband, kneeling before her, sobbing. At that moment, all the anger she had been carrying in her heart melted away. Her eyes filled with tears. Then, Ikena's mother stepped forward and held Cynthia's hands. With a sorrowful expression, she said, "My daughter, please forgive me. I am deeply sorry. You have always been a good daughter to me and to our family. Forgive me and my son for what we did." She then turned to Cynthia's mother and added, "Please, my in-law, forgive us as well." Cynthia's mother sighed and replied gently, "It is Cynthia who was hurt the most." Moved by their words, Cynthia accepted their apology. She and Ikena embraced each other tightly. Leaning close to his ear, she whispered, "I am pregnant." "What?" Ikena exclaimed in disbelief. "You are pregnant?" Overcome with joy, he began to jump and dance around the compound, and his mother joined him in celebration. Soon after, Imara's bride price was returned, and she gathered her belongings and left Ikena's house. Cynthia returned to her husband's home, and months later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The cry of the newborn filled their house, and their hearts overflowed with happiness once more. When we pray with a sincere heart, God hears our prayers. God's time is always the best.